to the Newburyport Literary Festival. My name is Sarah Robb. I'll be your host for this reading by poets and playwright Regie Gibson and poet Marilyn Hacker. We'll begin with Reggie Gibson, whose poetry and performance is widely available on YouTube through TEDx Talks and other forums. Okay, we'll start with introducing Reggie Gibson. The best place to experience his poetry is in his live audience. Here today at the festival, we get the next best thing online, but sometimes the next best still knocks your socks off. So I'd say hold on to your socks. Reggie Gibson lives a stone's throw across the Merrimack and Charles Rivers from Newburyport, but he is well known here and abroad. In Europe, where he wins prizes like the Europa Anversi Award, to give one example, and here in America at the National Endowment for the Arts in Washington, where he consults on various art and literary initiatives and exhibitions. Reggie Gibson's narratives, delivered with verve, call on all of us to elude the dark isms of race and sex. Of course, many of our poets are calling for societal change in their work, but Reggie Gibson accomplishes the feat of raising these calls to high art through an extraordinary fusion with the tropes and rhythms of centuries-old poetry. Thus, we come to his part in a radically innovative program called Shakespeare to Hip Hop, which translates Hamlet's soliloquies, for example, into the demotic speech of the streets. To is or not to is, that be the dig. So begins his poem addressed to at-risk teenagers contemplating suicide. To is or not to is, that be the dig. Elsewhere, Gibson calls on us to share the power that empowers us all, knowing that the body has intelligence which the intellect cannot dismiss. He doesn't just read, he enlivens and infuses his texts with drive and spirit and dramatizes them in several theater plays as well. Beginning as a performer in the New Line Cinema feature film Love Jones, Gibson's poem, Brother to the Night, was read by Lorenz Tate. From there, Gibson has gone on to explore African-American music in his play, The Juke, drawing on the classical Greek plays of Euripides and creating the Shakespeare time-traveling speakeasy, a theatrical literary concert. Gibson's flair and savvy have taken him to NPR and to HBO's Deaf Poetry Jam, to Harvard and to TEDx Talks on national TV. A National Poetry Slam champion and songwriter whose deep connections to music include Celtic jazz, blues, salsa, and classical European, Gibson has performed with and composed texts for the Boston Singers, Mystic Chorale, and the Handel plus Haydn Society, as well as earning fellowships and grants from the Boston Foundation, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and Live Arts Boston. On the faculty of Clark University, Reggie Gibson is also in demand for creative writing classes across the states. I had the honor to take his class on teaching poetry through Leslie a few years ago. I got to witness firsthand his dedication to poetry, his daring, his firebrand aesthetics, and his infamous toolbox, literally a carpenter's toolbox, jammed with intriguing live metaphors like castanets, eagle feathers, and tree bark masks, as well as handouts on classical measures of line and verse forms. I was lucky to be in his presence, and now we're all lucky again too. Please join me in welcoming Reggie Gibson.
Hello to everyone. Thank you, Zara, for that great introduction. It's always difficult to try and live up to that stuff. But I am so very, very happy to be here. Let me check my watch and make sure I don't go over time. And I'm happy to be performing with Miss Hacker, who is a legend in poetry and whose work.
I'm too young to be a legend.
Okay, you're a legend to me. But I'm also so glad that you're here and a part of this. Thank you. for being with me. I'll do a few readings of, I get some different kind of poetry. One, I'll start off with something which I think is a bit more autobiographical. I think of that. It was from a form that I created that I started experimenting with, which is called, I call it a chromo poem. And a chromo poem, what it is I think about a situation that, let's say, produced me and how I am, and I give a bunch of adjectives and ideas and thoughts about it. Then I whittle them down to 23, adjectives and thoughts on both sides of whatever might be tributaries to that river that produced an experience for me. And so I take 23 of those attributes and 23 words associated with it, rather, and 23 words from something else associated with it. And I put them together into a 46-word piece that is reflective of something in my life. Also make smaller pieces out of those 23. So I'll give you an example. This is one that I did for my mother and my father. And he, seed-bearing boy, deltas of farm dirt tilling beneath his Mississippi'd tongue, that for 8 years tried to speak her hard woman soil into wet bottomland. She, miracle of lotioned legs, unkinked hair, cat eye glasses, and cotton-picking fingers. She at last listened as his voice was the sizzle croon of frying catfish. Now that's 23 words put together. Those 23 words are also comprised of kennings, which are putting together a couple of to 3 words into one word. So I cheat a bit, but that's thanks to the ancient Norwegian poets and Anglo-Saxons. And so now combining what I put in he and she together into something that is more reflective of me. And so this is called me. There, where Mississippi tongues red farm dirt, a cotton-picking woman bore a boy. He spilled out, quick wet as a miracle of catfish. Though he left that seed soil, never learned to back-break it until it tilled. When he hears the delta call, he becomes bottomland, uncreaked by its croon. Now, this is a situation that was extraordinarily effective, extraordinarily affected me in a very profound way, ways in which I'm really starting to work out. And that is my mother raised me as a Jehovah's Witness, and my brother as well. And I don't know if you know about Jehovah's Witnesses, but when you leave that religion, they turn their backs on you, they shun you, and they're not no longer able to speak with you, and the parents are no longer able to have a connection or relationship with you as they once had. And so I had to go back and dig through what is my mother's ideas, what brought her to that. And when I looked through that, that need that she had for this heavenly spiritual father, it brought me to an understanding that that her father was not in her life. He wanted to be, but my grandfather would not allow him to marry my grandmother, my mom's mom. And so I followed that need in her to this need toward, again, a heavenly patriarch that could sort of tell her what to do and demand her in certain ways. And so when I left it, that became very difficult for her. So these are 3 pieces linked together: mother need, God demand, and son decision. She was of no father, mother need. A heart hurt that brought her to Jehovah God. He taught her to seek siblings on the unlocked side of doors. God demand, to love and follow me, abandon all that accept them, abandon all that accept and then leave me, whether they be mother, brother, sister, or yes, the son fruit of your loins. Son decision. He is loin fruit that left her Jehovah. He tells her how the world is a yes-knocking God, telling him if he seeks the other heart-hurted, he would never be abandoned, never be without father, never without sibling. He hoped, but knew she'd never understand. He had to open the door. That is a presage to a piece that I have, which examines what it meant for me to leave my mother's religion. And lately, I have been receiving a lot of phone calls from or emails from other Jehovah's Witnesses who are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who have had a difficult time leaving. And they have found me as a poet. They've known that I'm a ex-Jehovah's Witness, and they've been asking me, how did I get past it? What did I have to do? So I've been in these conversations with them about the necessity of it and also what they can expect. So this is something I wrote called How to Become an Ex-Jehovah's Witness Without Losing Your Mind. Overcome your Pavlovian desire to knock on doors. Sever the Methodist drone from your tongue. Curse its funkless inflection. Imbibe an Africanized gospel. Learn to fear any church that fears drums. Hallow the mouth to a devil sputter. Beat God like he stole someone from you. Pummel him until all that remains is an unthunderous pulp and question. Learn to lean that question's heft on your mother's prayer until you hear it snap like a dry clavicle. War into her face. Dare her to pray for you again. Forgive her though she does. Forgive her though she lies. Forgive her. Your name will be Iscariot, apostate, worldly backslider, kingdom unworthy. Your mark will be that of Cain and of beast. Only take lovers who can burn the Christ you were given. Then only take lovers who love only ash. Learn to purgatory. Learn to holy like a fist. Learn to move through the church of this world like a pissed-off priest in combat boots. Close one eye. Bless every back now turned to you. Then look at your hands and wait for the burning. Wait for the holes to appear. Holes just large enough for your fingers to doubt through. So in leaving that religion, what my mother didn't, I think, really understand is that she was planting the seeds for that all along. My mom, even though the mandate of a Jehovah's Witness was to be of the world, to be in the world, but not of the world, right? My mother wanted my brother and I to know about the world. So she would buy books, and these books she would get from AmVets and Goodwill and places like that. And they were marked, had full boxes that she would bring home. And in those boxes of books, I began to fall into some of the ideas there. And one particular box of books that she brought home contained what I like to call my good book, which was the complete works of William Shakespeare. Now, at this time, this particular time, I was a 13-year-old and was experiencing coming down with a case called the Hornies. And being a horny 13-year-old who had discovered that he was a flaming heterosexual who was in love with that slice of the universe that calls itself female, was starting to understand the world and through my loins. And as you can probably get, the only play that I knew of William Shakespeare, being this horny 13-year-old, would have been, wait for it, Romeo and Juliet. And so I began to read Romeo and Juliet, understood much of it, but didn't really get it until I actually saw the play. And then once I saw and heard Shakespeare's words clothed and garbed in flesh and heard it moving and what it did, I fell in love with the bard at that time. And years later, as I started teaching, I discovered something called the Juliet Letters. And I have my students write a letter to Juliet. And you can do this. You can write a letter to Juliet. You can send it to her villa in Verona, and someone from her staff of 20 people will text you, will write you back. So this is the first letter that I sent to Juliet, the first one I feel like sharing. And this is called Dear Juliet. Dear Juliet, I've always wanted to write to you. In fact, I've started this letter 3 times, and I've always stopped. I guess I grew unsure as to what a now 21st century African-American man would have in common with a 14th century Italian girl. especially given that at the time you were around, African Americans hadn't yet been invented. I suppose it also would have been difficult to get a letter to you knowing how your kinsmen feel about conversations between you and men of which they do not approve. And I am sure by now your daddy has talked to your peeps in Venice about Brabantio and that whole Othello Desdemona thing. A tragic bit of business, that. I guess I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, Julie. What was Romeo really like? I mean, really, yes, the story is well known. He goes to a party at your crib, and all your cousins start putting the heavy hating on him. But the brother is cool as penguin poop. That is, until he sees you on the dance floor, gyrating your hips to pan, flute, and fiddle. Then he steps to you like some medieval playboy, and next thing you know, you are leaving your fiancé, your family, and a house filled with bling to run away and lick poison off his lips. Did you think to yourself, how doth one wearing such tights and funny shoes have so much swagger? Have you seen any of the films? Yeah, well, don't go see that DiCaprio one. I mean, not at first. It's cool and all that, but it's a bit overwrought for my taste. But that Zeffirelli one, with Olivia Hussey playing you? Oh, that joint is epic. Look, I know it's a weird situation. Even though you was born before I was, I'm old enough to be your daddy. But I gotta ask, and I ain't trying to perv you out or nothing, but yo, I need to know, were you that cute in real life? I know that during your time, you probably weren't big on bathing or teeth, but I bet you had to have some kind of pre-Renaissance hotness happening. But for real though, back to Romeo. Was there something in how he profaned the holy shrine of your hand? How he could not force his eyes to leave yours even when he gave you his lips' sin and then asked for it back again? Or how his kiss was authored by some ancient book that is, if it is to open inside of a young girl, will only do so once. Sorry to talk so much about it, but ever since I was a boy, I have always wanted to be that kind of man. Now, even though I am married, and things seem to be working out a little bit better for me and my wife than they did for you and Romeo, I would still like to know, what made you want to follow him into death? What makes two people love each other like that? Well, enough for now, Jules. I'll write again when I can. I don't suppose you text or tweet, do you? Holler back at a brother when you get a minute, all right, girl? Sincerely, a man who still finds just a little bit of you in every woman. Thank you. Couple more, then I can be out of your hair. During the pandemic, which we are still in, but during the throes of it, I and some other artists got together we were invited to be a part of something that was called Latitudes. And in this, we began to work with different artists from all over who brought out something different in us. I had the pleasure of working with a woman named Wu Man from Wuhan province, and she is a pipa player. A pipa is an ancient instrument ancient lute instrument, has 4 strings and has between 10 and 32 frets. It's of course differing understandings of where this comes from, but the pipa is very, very central to a lot of Chinese music, and so me and Wu Man began to work together. Wu Man is really pretty badass at playing this instrument. She works with Yo-Yo Ma, his Silk Road project, and she heard me do something, and she began to create something that was in a blues format for the pipa. I heard that, and I began to write something that mentioned Chinese poets Li Po or Li Bai, who was from 701 to about 765, I believe, 762. And then also another poet, Bai Zhuyi, who was around in about 772 to 846. So they were not really at the same time, but they were very close. And I connected that to something in my history coming up from Mississippi. So this was called From the Yangtze to the Mississippi Delta, the across-water call of a string-born song. Levi, as you wandered in exile, did you hear the across-water call of the pipa being played by the slender fingers of a young girl on the other side of the Yangtze? Was each of her precisely plucked strings a singing mountain? Was each of her fingers slide and trill the sound of wind spilling down from the hills? Did you stop, wandering for just a moment to live inside the shimmer of those four strings? Perhaps pour yourself cup after cup of rice wine until you were nightfall drunk? I imagine you, Levi, a poet, smiling, twirling, laugh-dancing among the falling blossoms of dove trees, your shameless shadow offering sips to the somber moon. Decades later, another exiled poet, Bai Juyi, would meet that same girl, now a woman on that same river. She, too, also in exile from a former life, her fingers now sorrow-wise on the pipa's strings as it sits like a tear in her lap. Bai Juyi offers her wine. She plays the pipa, and in her music the two of you connect across time. Her music is the splatter of rain. It is the clatter of jumbled notes, each falling like a pearl on a platter of jade. Perhaps, upon hearing her, the both of you imagine the many women you've loved. Perhaps each of you imagines himself to be an emperor, forgetting a kingdom, longing to get lost in a woman's hair. A woman's hair as black as the insides of wine-shut eyelids. I wonder if in that moment, the both of you knew how, in a millennia from your now, the faint camphor smoke of that song would be carried to a faraway land and river. How it would conjure scenes like those you've seen along the Yangtze, scenes of ancient grandfathers sweating and toiling beneath straw hats, their bent backs aching and arching over crops, their sun-darkened arms now made muscular fire from years of planting and chopping and clearing mile after mile of sugarcane and cotton. And that, like the two of you, when night finds them, they too will sit down next to a moving body of slow water, offer libations beneath that same moon, as in the distance a string-born song quivers in the flower-censored dark, quivers like a woman's black hair. Thank you. And maybe I have time for one more. I have about 4 or 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
And this is the last piece I'll read. It is also something about when I was going through the throes during the pandemic, and I was really wishing to be with people, to be back in Cambridge, to be back in Boston, to be back around cities again. And so this is that longing of thinking, who will we be when we get back to who we can be? So this is written to Cambridge, written to Boston, written to those cities that have made us so much of who we are, and also to ourselves who, if you were like me, were in the throes and the depths of semi-depression, getting to know my office much better than I would have liked. This is called When This Thing Is Over. When this thing is over, when we are finally liberated, when we can emerge from our homes, we will never again take touch for granted. Never again treat after rain sunlight lightly. No, we will close our eyes, inhale and breathe it in, let it amber over our unmasked faces. We will look for other unmasked faces. No, maybe just two laughing together as they walk down the boulevard. We will fall in love with their laughter and start laughing like those annoying people who laugh because other people are laughing. In fact, we will laugh so loudly that they'll look at us and ask, "Why are you laughing?" And we'll say, "Because you were." And then we'll all look at each other and burst out laughing. When this thing is over, and we can be ourselves again. City, we will go to the Charles and paint you. And most of us can't paint. But lately, we find ourselves driven by a need to commit you to canvas, capture your colors at different times of day, like Monet at Rouen. We will watch dancers dance to your drumming, watch them bend, carve, and spell your spaces with the alphabet of their bodies, dig on musicians' musicking blossoms in our minds. We will hear singing again, fall into the us-shaped cracks of a voice lilting a language that only the newly broken parts of us can decipher. When this thing is over, and we can be ourselves again, we will let your voices enter us like the scent of masala, falafel, challah, reminding us of countries we must live long enough to visit. Grin at men holding each other on street corners, and at women kissing each other as if today were the last. Because one day it will be. We will throw our empty arms around the willing and welcoming circumference of you, walk into places we feared to enter a year before, wade through the haze of aftershave and perfume, eavesdrop on earlobe close conversations, pen poems about lipstick prints on wine glasses, and order 2 drinks, one for ourselves and one to be left in front of us, untouched, in remembrance of those we've lost. So, when this thing is over and we can be us again, look for us. We'll be the ones slightly sadder, a bit more weepy-eyed, but smiling. The ones who now know that even the mundane is beautiful. The ones for whom absence has made everything more present. Thank you all for your patience, for listening, for everyone who has put this together. I want to thank you for your efforts in this. And now I turn things back over to Zara to lead us into the next half. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. That was extraordinary. Why am I not surprised? Thank you. It was truly, truly. And that was a good poem to end your reading with too, as Alfred mentioned. All right, so let's move on to another great American poet, Marilyn Hacker, who is zooming to us today from Paris. She, coming of age in the 60s in the ghetto turned barrio, the teenage Marilyn Hacker could often be found, and I quote, sitting on a bar stool reading till closing. These lines are from her Nights of 1962, The River Merchant's Wife, a reference to Ezra Pound, of course, but this polyglot poet could well have been reading Adrienne Rich or W.H. Auden. Moving from New York to Paris, she became bilingual in French and a dedicated student of Arabic. Although New York drew her back to City College and her American audience frequently, but she has not lived in the States since 2010. The work of a rigorous mind, Marilyn Hacker's poems encompass the torments of our time and of recent history in ways viscerally personal, sororal, familial, and overtly political. Her understandings were forged in those New York City tenements. What we meant by poor when I was 20, I'm quoting now, was a tenement with clanking pipes and roaches. What we meant was up 6 flights of grimed, piss-pungent stairs. 4 babies and a baby-faced welfare worker forbidden to say birth control. Marilyn Hacker's slight accent, she tells us, tags her origins. This fact springboards a brilliantly compressed poem scourge against conformity and simplistic ideas of right and wrong. That, quoting again, hegemonic televangelist zeal to dumb the the world down to its virulent cartoon contours. When friends die of AIDS, this poet is there chronicling and mourning them. When she's diagnosed with breast cancer, this poet grieves her loss, but equally grieves how, from the Holocaust to countries across the globe, political and civil hatreds metastasize. She narrates conflict and survival, knowing that she is implicated in both just by being alive. Marilyn Hacker has published many, many books of poetry and 16 books translating French and Francophone poets. I will post these links. I think I may already have posted them in the chat room to our partners at the festival, the Jabberwocky bookstore and the other one, where you may purchase her books. They're there. I checked it out. And you can also get her book A Different Distance. So you'll also find links there to new poems of hers and to a recent article in the Guardian about her book of rengas, A Different Distance. Marilyn Hacker is a skillful prosodist, a master of received forms from sestinas to the Japanese renga and Malaysian pantoum to the ancient Middle Eastern ghazal. While using a complex archaic meter, that one that Jeffrey Brock used with such success too, she will ground her language in contemporary idioms, natural speech, and even street language. The critical mass of her distinctions is impressive. It includes the National Book Award, the Lambda Literary Award, the Leonore Marshall Poetry Prize, the Robert Fagles Translation Prize, the Argana Prize for Poetry from the House of Poetry in Morocco, as well as fellowships from the Guggenheim and the Ingram Murrow Foundations. In 2008, she was made Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, and she's a professor emerita of the City College of New York. Please join me in welcoming Marilyn Hacker.
Maybe you will have to just have an oral reading without
Okay, I would rather do that than
Let's do that. It'll be fine. I think that's good.
okay.
because we do hear you very clearly.
We hear you very
Okay, no,
clearly.
that's really all that counts.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
Good.
yeah, rather than wasting a lot of time. Okay. I will start with a poem called Casting Out Rhymes. That's easy enough.
Good.
Yes, dictionaries opening again. Yes, scorched across her forehead like a stain. Yes, less to say than cognate words contain. Yes, caffeine and butalbital for pain. Yes, ruptured synapses hobble the brain. No, watch gray water circle down the drain. No, looking out the window of the train. No, not the melody, just the refrain. No, not temerity. No, not disdain. No, stroked across the scar against the grain. Yes, written in another alphabet. Yes, odor of the night's first cigarette. Yes, hands and face and trousers grimed with soot. Yes, from the freeway saw the minaret. Yes, to the proposed amendment, but no, the initial syllable was not. No, it was the verb that she forgot. No, his raincoat and his shoes were wet. No, coffee and a square of chocolate. No, just damp earth still clinging to the root. Yes, with a clear head after a day's fast. Yes, any fantasy could be the last. Yes, touch the scar that used to be a breast. Yes, eidolon of the iconoclast. Yes, clasped the beaded bracelet on her wrist. No taciturn and unforgiving guest. No thought of lapis, thought of amethyst. No spoke to no one and still felt harassed. No knew it was futility at best. No watched the street after the bus had passed. Yes, blotches that the years splotched on her skin. No long-term memory in violet. Yes, twice a day, pre-prandial insulin. No, from the bakery across the street. Yes, furious, implacable, and sane. No fingers splayed, not clenched into a fist. Yes, classes daily at the Institute. No more like car exhaust than autumn mist. Yes, rainwater, the print of hoof and boot. No, not in fact, the lips your lips had kissed. This poem is called Pantomime and Wartime, and it's dedicated to Wafa Zain al-Abidin in Mosul in Iraq, and in memory of Adrienne Rich. Were the mountain women sold as slaves in the city my friend has not written from for 2 weeks? One of the just has given back his medal. I wake up 4 times in the night, soaked with sweat. In the city my friend has not written from, for 2 weeks, there was almost enough electricity. I wake up 4 times in the night, soaked with sweat, and change my shirt and go to sleep again. There was almost enough electricity to heat water, make tea, bathe, write emails, and change her shirt and go to sleep again. Her mother has gallstones. Her sister mourns. Heat water, make tea, bathe, write emails to Mosul, New York, London, Beirut. Her sister mourns a teenage son who died in a stupid household accident. To Mosul, Havana, London, Beirut, I change the greeting, change the alphabet. War, like a stupid household accident, changes the optics of a scene forever. I change the greeting, change the alphabet. Hola, morning of light, ya compañera. Change the optics of a scene forever, present and always altogether elsewhere. Morning of roses, kiss you, hasta luego to all our adolescent revolutions, present and always altogether elsewhere. It seemed as if something would change for good tomorrow. All our adolescent revolutions gone gray, drink exiles' coffee if they're lucky. It seemed as if something would change for good tomorrow. She was our conscience and she died too early. The gray exiles drink coffee if they're lucky. Gaza's survivors sift through weeping rubble. She was our conscience, but she died too early after she spoke of more than one disaster. Cursing, weeping, survivors sift through rubble. One of the just has given back his medal after he spoke of more than one disaster. How can we sing our songs if we are slaves?
Mm.
Okay. This poem is an elegy for the African-American poet June Jordan, who was a great friend of mine and whom I still miss. She died young of breast cancer in 2002. It's called Elegy for a Soldier. And June had a book not a book of poems, but a book about her childhood, which was called Soldier, because that was her father's, her West Indian father's nickname for her. And the poem is in 2 parts. Elegy for a Soldier, June Jordan, 1936 to 2002. The city where I knew you was swift. A lover cabbed to Brooklyn, broke, but so what? After the night shift in a 2nd Avenue diner. The lover was a Quaker, a poet, an anti-war activist, was blonde, was 24. Wet snow fell on the access road to the Manhattan Bridge. I was neither lover, slept uptown, but the arteries, street lights, headlines, phone lines, feminine plural links ran silver through the night city as dawn and the yellow cab passed on the frost-blurred bridge, headed for that day's last or first coffee. The city where I knew you was rich in bookshops, potlucks, ad hoc debates, demos, parades, and picnics. There were walks I liked to take. I was on good terms with 2 rivers. You turned, burned, flame wheel of words, lighting the page, good neighbor on your homely street and park slope, whose Russian Zaidas, Jamaican grocers, dyke vegetarians, young, gifted everyone claimed some changes, at least a new food co-op. In the laundromat, ordinary women talked revolution. We knew we wouldn't live forever, but it seemed as if we could. The city where I knew you was yours and mine by birthright, Harlem, the Bronx. Separately, we left it and came separately back. There's no afterlife for dialogue, divergences we never teased apart to weave back together. Death slams down in the middle of all your unfinished conversations. Whom do I address when I address you, larger than life as you always were, not alive now? Words are not you, books are not you, ashes on the Pacific tide, you least of all. I talk to myself to keep the line open. The city where I knew you is gone. Pink icing roses spelled out passion on a book-shaped chocolate cake. The bookshop's a sushi bar now, and passion is long out of print. Would you know the changed street that cab swerved down toward you through cold white mist? We have a Republican mayor. Threats keep citizens in line, anthrax, suicide attacks. A scar festers where towers once were, dissent festers unexpressed. You are dead of a woman's disease. Who gets to choose what battle takes her down? Down to the ocean, friends mourn you with no time to mourn. Part 2. You who stood alone in the tall bay window of a Brooklyn brownstone, conjuring morning with free-flying words, knew the power, terror in words, in flying. Knew the high of solitude while the early light prowled 7th Avenue, lupine, hungry like you, your spoils raisins and almonds, ballpoint pen, yellow foolscap. You who stood alone in your courage, never hesitant to underline the connections between rape, exclusion and occupation, and separations, were alone and were not alone when morning blotted the last spark of you out. Around you, voices you no longer had voice to answer, eyes you were blind to. All your loves were singular. You scorned labels, claimed Black, woman, and for the rest, eluded limits, Quicksilver, Caribbean, staked out self-definition. Now your death, as if it were yours, your house, your dog, your friends, your son, your serial lovers. Death's not yours. What's yours are 1,000 poems alive on paper. You, at once an optimist, a Cassandra, Lilith in the wilderness of her lyric, were a Black American, born in Harlem, citizen soldier. If you had to die, and I don't admit it, who dared? What if each time they kill a Black man, we kill a cop? Couldn't you take down with you a few prime villains in the Capitol who are also mortal? June, you should be living. The states are bleeding. Leaden words like homeland translate abandoned dissident discourse. 20 years ago, you denounced the war crimes still in progress now as Jenin, Ramallah, dominate, then disappear from the headlines. Palestine, your war. To each nation its Jews, wrote Primo Levi. Palestinians are Jews to Israelis. Afterwards, he died in despair, or so we infer, despairing. To each nation its Jews, its Blacks, its Arabs, Palestinians, immigrants, its women. From each nation its poets, Mahmoud Darwish, Kavanaugh, Shahid, who, beloved witnessed for silenced Kashmir, cautioned, shift the accent and he was martyr. Audre Lorde, Neruda, Amichai, Senghor, and you, June Jordan. I'm going to read two short poems from my great friend, the British Iranian poet Mimi Khalvati, was asked to edit an anthology or put together an anthology of poems somehow building on fado themes, the fado, the Spanish tragic erotic song, and I wrote three of these at Mimi's request, and I'm going to read two of them, and they're not terribly long. The first one is called Tahrir, and that means liberation in Arabic. It's also the name of the square that has become famous in Cairo. Tahrir. Through the skein of years, I had nothing to fear from this place. How final and brief it would be to disappear from this place. The tangle of driftwood and Coke cans and kelp in the sand made me think of the muddle that drove us, my dear, from this place. An orchard, a vineyard, a stable, a river, a wall. The impassable distance today once seemed simple and near from this place. There was the word refuge. There was the word refugee, who, confused and disrupted, began to appear from this place. The silence that lasted for decades, for months, or for hours will sooner or later be broken. You'll hear from this place. There is a wall, and the words that we write on the wall. Libertação. Can you make out Tahrir from this place? From your bedroom window with the sun coming up, I could see dusty jitneys crawl toward the frontier from this place. My names rhyme with yours, and the things that are done in our names, in whatever language, no longer sound terribly clear from this place. And this is the second and last Fado poem, Black Boat, which is the title of Barco Negro is the title of a famous Fado song. If you were there when I woke, with my barbed wire, with my scars, you would avert your green gaze. I would feel the chill of regret. Though you said something else in sunlight over wine. I saw a cross on a tall rock, and a black boat danced on light. Someone waved. Was it you? A brown arm between white sails. Old women know that more go away than will ever return, than the morning has scars. In the wind as it blows wet sand against the panes, on the water that sings, in the fire as it dies, in blue sheets warmed by someone sleeping alone, on an empty park bench when they lock up the square, you are still there. Brown arm, green gaze, black boat, blown sand, barbed wire. And I think I will close. Can you all hear me?
We certainly
Yes.
can.
Absolutely.
Again.
Okay. I think I will close with a new sequence that I have to read off a telephone. So let me get on the telephone. And if I, oh, here we go. All right. There we go. These were written last July in a small town in southwestern France called Montpellier, and I will I'll read them. And except that they move at one point back to Beirut in 2019, but it says 2019. I'll read that. July, the air is thick. I'm out of sorts with my ankles, knees, wrists, with my spine that's fusing into something that's not mine or not my body, functional. Resort to pills, to naps, a vegetative state, wanting a summer afternoon again, to walk through fields and look out at the mountain. Attractive nuisance of the internet instead, 4 countries, daily newspapers, a stack of books, but I can't concentrate, be in his mind, craft, story, be in hers. Imaginary swelling in my feet, sour stomach, prickling under the short hairs, the desiccated nerves of lost desires. The desiccated nerves of lost desires don't now even reweave themselves in dream. Sometimes I want to want, I want to scream as if I poked my finger in a fire. In fact, all I want really is to sleep 8 hours or 6, not lie midnight till dawn, lap off, determined not to turn it on, admit I'm wide awake and that I'll creep around tomorrow like an invalid, afraid I'll lose my credit card or trip and break a metatarsal with my mind elsewhere, putting down my coffee cup in the next door cafe, the way I did last year as soon as we were unconfined. Last year, as soon as we were unconfined, people gathered on cafe terraces in all weather. It was May. It was a warm spring, not a gray one, where it rained until July. Some people fled on trains to natal or vacation villages to stay. There were more graphs than elegies. There was no cure. There still were no vaccines. We replaced cliches of solitude, trees in bud seen from windows, still lives of food cooked solo, with the river, a smiling friend, face mask, a bracelet dangling from her hand, and a barge passing in the distance. In October, everything shut down again. 2019. And at Clemenceau is a street in Beirut, 2019. Mid-October, everyone was out marching, ambling downtown on Clemenceau. The banks banged down their shutters, dropped a row of steel window protectors. All Beirut was bristling, singing. Somebody would shout a slogan, chant it. Someone would repeat or rhymed it. Women laughed. A toddler sat on her father's shoulder, waving her sun hat. 3 little refugees who'd sit and beg outside Al-Fathani grocery, where I'd stop for feta cheese or eggs, still brain fogged from the university, dashed down the street, their hair flying, and screamed, "The people want the fall of the regime." The people want, next fall, the same regime stayed put, but half the city had exploded in August. On WhatsApp, everyone I know, did you, were you? Shattered glass and chaos. Reem on her terrace as it blew up. Nadim in a refugee squat in Burj Hamoud. In the afternoon, in the ER all afternoon, Fuad triaged what only seemed life-threatening. 2 cab drivers, a grandmother more concerned with where her grandsons were. I wasn't there. WhatsApp, email, but not there. My squares and riverbanks, oddly serene, riverains strolling, dogs, few visitors, in a parenthesis from quarantine. Parenthesis between 2 quarantines, the morning makeshift grocery cafe on the town square, coffee, a Perrier, a breeze from anywhere I might have been. The wrought iron table in the roof garden, olive tree, rose bush, fan of hortensia leaves, same notebook, later the same day, pale green, green shiny, splayed green, olive green, Julie's creation, but she's far away, this estival, also parenthesis, now coming to an end. COVID tests, train, certificates attesting our vaccine status. Next month, a new government pass. Tomorrow is the last day of July. Tomorrow is the last day of July, and so the train, once carefree, gagged in masks. Bring fruit, a sandwich, water. Tonight, with casks as decor, crisp white in ice bucket, I dine one last time on the Place. A family, a couple, 8 young friends. No one greets, asks, and why should they? There are different risks, excess of solitude, of company. I brought my notebook and Germaine Tillon's pre-war years in the Aurès, incongruity of following her there while nibbling on filet de bar and miniature desserts, claiming some solo solidarity. August, the air is thick. I'm out of sorts. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Marilyn. Somehow it seems appropriate to end. Perhaps I won't start my video again. Thank you. Thanks to Reggie Gibson for a terrific reading, and to Marilyn for being with us from Paris. It was truly a moving experience. So, Alfred, are we good?
I think so. I think that this was quite
Something, yes.
quite an unusual and wonderful experience, and I think we're going to remember this one. Thank you so much, Reggie, and thank you so much, Marilyn. Just it was terrific end to a really wonderful day.
You're very welcome. Thank you all for hosting us, for having us here.
Well, thank you all very much, and sorry about the video, but maybe the poems are better that way.
Thank you, Marilyn Hacker, and thank you, Reggie Gibson.
Thank you, and
Okay.
thank you, Reggie. I was really, really delighted to hear your work and to meet you even virtually.
Thank you. Thank you as well. It was an honor.
Yes. Okay. Lada Saida. Bye-bye.